What people don't understand is refugees are, to begin with, are asylum seekers. They are fleeing conflict. This gentleman, he was fleeing and lost a leg. Someone fashioned a wooden leg for him. So he basically walked from Syria to Europe on this wooden leg.
You're listening to Across Archives, a space that highlights storytelling projects, archives, and oral histories that share the experiences of migrants, immigrants, internally displaced people, and refugees around the world. Here, we explore a wider community of storytellers, archivists, advocates, and scholars whose work inspires our own at the Refugee Archive. Together, these efforts bridge divides, build solidarity, and reshape how the record of displacement is remembered.
I am Kristi with Across Archives for the Refugee Archive, and I'm joined today by Robin Peterson, Director of Archives at Their Story is Our Story. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Great. I would love for you to give us an introduction of who you are and a little bit about your background and how you got involved with this organization.
Okay, so I graduated in history and then got married, had a family, trying to figure out my life. But I wanted to work, and I worked at the National Archives. I've done research, obviously, in my degree. So I literally, for my career, Googled freelance genealogy, and that's where in 2004 or 5, that's where my career began. So I'm a professional genealogist, worked for Ancestry.com as a genealogist. I was pursuing a degree or master's in Holocaust studies, and I've always been drawn to, this is going to sound very odd, but conflict, but the human side of conflict. So I've studied the Civil War and World War II quite extensively. And then with my genealogy research, being able to piece together people's stories through various documents that I would find. And then my family moved from Utah to Arizona, and I was still pursuing my professional career, but I wanted to get involved personally in refugee work. And you probably feel the same. It's like you are drawn to it. And for me, it was the human side and the resiliency that these incredible humans have developed because they had to. We all have to develop resiliency in one way or another, but they're some of the most remarkable humans I have ever come in contact with. So I started just volunteering in our area. The resettlement agencies, they work with a nonprofit that helps set up apartments. And I would do that. I was doing that for a couple of years, and I was just wanted to see if I could use my skills as a historian and a genealogist and a storyteller better. And I was talking with one of the directors of the nonprofit I was volunteering with, and she said, "Oh, you need to get in contact with Their Story is Our Story. This is exactly what they're doing." They had recently come to Arizona and done an interview trip. And they had brought them a book that they had recently published. This was 2019, so I believe the book was published in 2018. And so I honestly, I immediately went home. I went to their website. I filled out their volunteer form and just gave a little bio of myself. And almost instantly, I would say within an hour or two, I got a phone call from one of the directors saying, "Hey, we really could use your skills. We've been in negotiations with Brigham Young University to develop an archive. They've donated unlimited database space to us, and we've been telling stories since 2016 around the world, and we need somewhere to house them and someone to develop that." So I was like, "I'll see if I can figure that out." I've never developed an archive. I've worked in archives most of my career, but so 2019, I hopped on in, and they said, "Hey, in the next month, we have a research or an interview trip coming in Seattle. How would you like to join in and see what we do?" So I did.
So tell me a little bit about that interview trip, because this is distinct from some other archival storytellers, refugee storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone traveled to the refugee or the displaced person or the migrant and tells their story in person, eye to eye. This is a bit unique. So tell us about that. How was that trip? And are all of the stories developed this way?
So like I said, I came in 2019 and the organization began in 2016 with a few of the founders were living in Europe. And it was right at the crux of the Syrian crisis and just an influx of Syrian refugees into many of European countries. And they really wanted to humanize, because a lot of times with refugees and immigrants, they are put in categories and lumped together. And the founders wanted people to see that they are human in every way, obviously. And like you said, sitting knee to knee, eye to eye with someone, you cannot help but feel their humanity and share your own humanity. So so they tried prior to the pandemic, they tried to do as many research, or I keep calling them research trips, I'm sorry, interview trips. And they would partner with some NGOs in the area. And we value consent very highly. So they would speak with who feels comfortable, who is this not an issue dangerous for, and then we would set up some interviews. So I went to Seattle, and there were a few organizations that we worked with, and they partnered us with them, and we set up the interviews. And we went to a couple Syrian families' homes and Afghan families' home. There were this group of former attorneys that were retired that had bought an RV and were sitting outside of an immigration detention center. They would help people who were released, giving them coats and clothes and things like that. And we interviewed quite a few people, and it really just sparked my desire to help more on a one-on-one basis.
That's great. That's really good. So you went on that trip, and you've only been on 2 trips total.
Correct.
But because the majority of your work is spent working on the transfer of archival information to the university partner, is that right?
Yes. We handle so we sit and we record. You typically have 2 people record an interview, and then we have a team that will transcribe them, edit them, and scrub them, make sure, like I said, with consent, if they want an alias, if they don't want their city or even country of origin mentioned, things like that. We'll go through and scrub. And then there's a team of writers that will then do a full-length write for our socials, for our website. And then I take the interview transcript and some of the photos, and then write the descriptions, write some keywords, and then upload those to the archive. And so after 2019 began a 2-year process to develop the bones of the archive. And like I said, COVID hit and a lot of things shifted and shut down. So there was a lot less in person. And from there, we went to, obviously during COVID, we went primarily digital. We would do Zoom interviews with individuals, which made it a lot more difficult, but still manageable. And now we've been able to shift and do that quite well, as most industries have done. Zoom has become online videos have been fantastic. And then again, so same process, transcripts, and then uploading those to the archive.
So could anyone go to Brigham Young University library database and research images and also transcripts of these interviews?
Yes. So through the Brigham Young University's library, it's called the Scholars Archive. And anyone, whether you are a university student or just anyone, can go to it and enter in some keywords, a city or a country or a year, and pull up the transcripts and some photos. The archive itself is, if you think of, obviously the front end is a website and it's flashy and beautiful. And this is, you would think a card catalog would be like an old school card catalog. That's what our archive looks like. So it's not big, it's not flashy. are and it's intended for research purposes. So it is it's described and edited, but it's not written in story form. It's the transcript of the actual interview. And then our website has the written stories, still written in first person, but they're more flow like a story would be.
Now, is there any particular story that you can remember which stands out that has had some kind of impact on you personally?
There's a couple from my beginnings. So I went back through, and at the beginning was starting with our beginnings with 2016 and moving forward. There was one gentleman who lost a leg, and he was young. He was, I think maybe 20 in Syria, lost his leg in the war and walked or was hauled in a trunk by smugglers, which is how a lot of these refugees were able to migrate. Because a refugee is someone who had to cross an international border because of conflict or climate or whatever the reason is, and then they are registered with the UN as an official refugee. What people don't understand is refugees are, to begin with, are asylum seekers. They are fleeing conflict. So this gentleman, he was fleeing in any way he could, lost a leg. Someone fashioned a wooden leg for him. So he basically walked from Syria to Europe on this wooden leg and then made it to Paris and was able to be connected over time with a doctor and a prosthetic creator, and they made him an official leg. But just his story, just the resiliency and the joy he still had behind his eyes with the pain and the suffering that he experienced, that really changed my soul. That really, and then there were just a Congolese woman who happened to be resettled in Utah, who just, African women are some of the most incredible humans on the planet. Just what they have had to endure, but how joyful they are. And on these research trips, anytime you go into anyone's home, just their culture is to shower you with any kinds of food, with nuts and tea. And let me pull out a full spread. There aren't a lot of Americans that you want a Coke, you want some water, but they will, even if they have nothing, they will share everything with you. And one of the main things that we really, like I said, they're able to tell whatever part of the story they want to tell, but you have to build that trust. So you don't start the interview with, so what happened to you in 2016 in Syria? How did you lose your leg? There's no way you can do that. You start by just building, tell me about your name. How did you get your name? Tell me about your favorite childhood memory, things like that, to build trust. And then that's when the food comes out. And that's when you are part of their family. Once you share your own story, because we're human, that's what we do. And the most recent one that will stick with me forever, she came to the US on a visa. She overstayed that visa and basically lived her life here for a good 20 years and built a life. She was a housekeeper. She was actually a housekeeper. And then she became a healthcare worker. And at a traffic stop, she was stopped and they said, "Oh, you're going to have to come with us." It was a non-paid ticket for something that had happened 4 years ago or something. I can't remember the timeline. And she was put into detention. A woman speaks perfect English. And we just published her story, Esther, not too long ago, maybe a month or so ago. And I happened to be able to be involved in that interview. And I would ask everyone to go to our website and read that, or our socials. Her story is incredibly powerful. The experience, not just, from the horrific things that she told about detention, to her just stepping up. She sat in on every hearing that she possibly could to learn more and more. How do I get out of here? How do I get out of here? And when no one was being granted bonds to get out of detention, the judge was like, I should throw you back into your country immediately because you have no status. You have nothing. But you're remarkable. I'm not going to do that. So with her ingenuity, because once you're in detention, you have to go through the bond hearing process and prove your case. And the judge was like, you have no case, but you're pretty remarkable. So he granted her a bond. And because she spoke English and Spanish, she was translating for all of these women who didn't speak any English. And she became their advocate. And she was she was a detainee, but she became one of their advocates. Now that she has been released, she works at the church in that releases when their people are released from ICE. They literally just drop them and drive away and nothing. Like they don't have a phone, they don't have anything. So this church helps them get to where they're going. She now volunteers with them to help people get where they're going. Oh, that woman is a amazing human being.
Oh my gosh, when I hear stories like this and others, I'm like, we are so lucky to have some of these people. We're so lucky that some of these people came to us and were placed in these positions. We're so lucky. But I'm hearing a lot of different demographics. So I want to also touch on this because as I talk to other archivists, people have particular focuses.
Right.
So when I think of yours from a geographic and a demographic perspective, I started in Syria, but then are we just focusing now on the US? Has it morphed into that? And also men, women, ages, types, is there any particular algorithm you're using to frame this thing?
Not necessarily. We intentionally and unintentionally follow, this is going to sound odd, but follow the conflict. So it began because the Syrian conflict, but then the founders discovered there are more than the Syrians. There's all kinds of Africans that are here from all over, from every country of Africa. In 2016 to 2019-ish, there was a huge influx. And also just in the news, asylum seekers in America. And then in 2021, with the fall of Afghanistan and 88,000 were brought to the US, that became a massive focus. So we tried to, and not exclusively, but we try to follow the headlines with the human side of the headlines. I guess maybe that's a little bit of what we try to do. So right now, a big emphasis is on asylum seekers and immigrants in the United States. And at the beginning, it was Syria and Africa, and then shifted to Afghanistan because we try to dehumanize what's going on so people aren't just seeing the news flashes and 100,000, 1 million, or whatever of these people. Break that down to this woman who probably should be a lawyer. And then all these Afghans. This one was a helicopter pilot. This one was an endodontist. This one was a doctor. And you just really humanize the conflict that is happening.
But when you're saying Syrians, Africans, and Afghanis, are you saying that ones that have made it to the US?
So yes and no. We have prior to the pandemic, Their Stories, Our Story was doing research trips, and I keep pulling them back because I'm a researcher. Interview trips, but to refugee camps. So they weren't going to Congo, or obviously they weren't going to Afghanistan. They were the individuals that had been moved to certain refugee camps, or like with the Syrian crisis. Yes, a lot of them were that's in Jordan. It's one of the largest refugee camps in the world. So they visited there, and they also went to, oh gosh, I'm blanking now, but with the Rohingya population, they went there. But now with really, honestly, like with COVID and shifting, we shifted our model and are doing like what is happening with with refugee populations and immigrant populations within the US. We used to be a lot more international and had groups in Italy and Germany and London and Paris. That's shifted to now we're really more US. And honestly, some of it is funding because, again, we're a nonprofit. We don't have paid employees. And then COVID had made us shift.
How many stories are we talking about here that you've collected so far in the archive?
Total, still working on, and within the archive itself does not have nearly the amount that we have because of various reasons. But overall, oh gosh, in the thousands, I would say, maybe 1,500, 2,000. Oh, this in the past almost next 10 years.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. That's many hours. Those thousands of hours.
Yeah. So with the research trips, they would take a group up to maybe 10. And the two that I was involved with, we had, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 8 of us. And then we would split up teams and we try to be too deep in an interview, plus if we're doing a videographer at the same time. And when they were originally first started, when they were going to the refugee camp, they were able to do quite a bit more. Now it's less just because the concentration is not as high.
So what is the North Star here? Are you aiming for 1 million hours, or is there any kind of goal that the organization itself has of which you're trying to reach with all this?
That's a really good question. We haven't
Or is
really...
this like a legacy project? Just keep going, or
it's a keep going. We don't have a cap or a North Star, I think, and we're really good at shifting and morphing to what is, whether it's what the conflict is, which we don't really like to focus on the conflict itself, but it's really to try to help bridge the gap and break the them versus us, and to bring humanity into play, because there's a lot of, oh, that's so sad. Yes, that's true, but I want to hear, can you make me your falafel? Can you make me your kabli palau? Teach me how to do it. I want to, and tell me what your kids are doing. Tell me, how is your English class going? Tell me about your dentist practice. It's to bring humanity into it. But like I said, we shift, and we had to shift quite a bit with COVID and do a lot more digital and online. And we've discovered that it works pretty well. It does break the humanity side of it, like the sitting eye to eye part of it, the human connection part of it a little bit. But I feel like we've done a really good job at doing the best we can with what we're given. And then it allows us to be more places, to spread wider than we were able to do doing physical trips.
Sure. Personal question for you. We're ending 2025. We're nearing the end of 2025. We're going into 2026. What does 2026 look like for you in the world of refugees and migrants and asylum seekers over there in Phoenix?
So in my day job, which I also volunteer, I'm a partner at a refugee firm. We work heavily with Afghans that are in the area and immigrants and asylum seekers primarily. And so I said this yesterday, and I say it every day, there's not a whole heck of a lot of good news right now in refugee and immigrant world. For refugees, funding has stopped. There are agencies, everybody basically has shut their doors. And because my partner and I, we're privately funded, we don't have government grants, we're able to keep our doors open. We're able to see people, and we try to help them the best we can, or give them the best resources we can. Not financially, we can't. But so 2026, I don't know. With a lot of our Afghans, we've been working a lot with family reunification. So those 88,000 who were evacuated into the States, I don't know the exact number, but several tens of thousands of those were evacuated without their families. And so we've been working on legally reuniting those families. And we had gotten to about 70, 75 families when travel ban hit and visas are not being processed. And we have to tell people every single day, your family's not coming for 3 years unless something dramatically changes. And things dramatically change every day, but not for the benefit of refugees and immigrants. So we do a lot of silly smiling and jokes, and we have English classes where we do karaoke, and we try to bring as much joy to these people as possible, but also sharing their stories and humanizing them in our little sphere of the world, because there is not a lot of positivity going around in the news, in the neighborhoods, in anywhere. And we do a lot of know your rights now, and we didn't have to do prior to January 2025. I raced to detention centers that I didn't have to do prior to January 2025. Yeah, there's a lot of that. And so we're trying to tell stories. We do have to shift a little bit in, because privacy is shifting and the access to things is shifting. So we, as in my office, we're trying to figure out, how do we still share on our socials, our people, and their story is our story. We're also trying to figure out, how do we share safely these stories, because they're there. Like, the archive is open to anyone. Our website is open to anyone. Our socials are open to anyone. How do we do that safely? And we don't know. But we just started those kind of talks. How do we keep our people safe? Because that is truly our number one priority at Their Stories, Our Story, is to keep our people safe and tell their stories safely.
That's a really good point. Something that I also want to get into researching a bit more, the data security going for sensitive stories, especially from vulnerable populations of people. But okay, So anyone listening or anyone interested in Their Stories, Our Story, what is your call to action? What should they do? What do you want them to do? Listen to the stories? Help those to the left and right?
My call to action is yes. So I would, first and foremost, go to our website, go to our socials. And then also, everyone takes Ubers. And I guarantee probably 80% of your Uber drivers, they're immigrants or refugees. Talk to them. Just say, hey, what's your name? Oh, where did you get your name? One of our directors, she had to pull away for a couple of years. But her biggest thing was, that was what she first started with in an interview, is, what is your name? Where did you get that name? Because there's always a story behind a name. And then that really softens things. And, oh my gosh, tell me about your favorite food. You don't have to say, where are you from to start. Just, tell me about your favorite, like, what was your favorite food growing up? Someone's going to say a taco. Someone's going to say kalbi pilau. Someone's going to say fried chicken. And then you can get into things like that. But really, just open your heart to people that may or may not sound like you or look like you, because they're remarkable people.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time today and helping us learn about This Story Is Our Story. It's a very important work that you're doing.
Thank you very much for this. This is wonderful.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Across Archives, a project by the Refugee Archive. Our conversations here highlight the storytellers, archivists, and advocates who are shaping how migration and displacement are remembered. If you'd like to go deeper and hear the voices of women living these experiences firsthand, join us on The Archive Speaks, our oral history audio archive, featuring powerful stories from female-headed households and single mothers in displacement around the world. Together, Across Archives and The Archive Speaks preserve memory, amplify unheard voices, and reshape how we understand the experience of displacement. Listen to The Archive Speaks wherever you get your podcasts, or visit the Refugee Archive to explore both projects and learn more about our work.